All right, I think we're live. Hopefully my connection is gonna work. I'm so excited, guys, for today's session. Now, nobody's still joining, but I genuinely feel like I'm some sort of BBC breaking news live commentator, and you'll shortly see why. Hello there. I'm just gonna wait the usual few seconds to allow more people to join in, and then we're gonna start. All right, hi everyone, and welcome to what is a rather extraordinary community pulse session. My name is Diana, and as you might know, I am a community manager here at Human Rights Pulse, and I am absolutely delighted to introduce to you today's topic, which is the US presidential elections. So I don't know if you've read the news already, but President Biden is projected to be the new president of the United States alongside Kamala Harris, which is a historic moment for all of us. And as you might have seen already from the promotional poster, today's topic was and is the US presidential election impact on the global human rights agenda. Now, at first, of course, when results weren't in already, we would have given you some sort of comparison with Trump also, with a Trump alternative also on our talk today. But now, of course, we're going to focus on Biden instead. And to do so, we have a very special guest, our very own co-founder, Inder, who is a U.S. citizen and he's in the U.S. at present. And he's gonna talk to you about that. Now, let me just invite him straight away. Now, let's see. Yes. Right now.
Oops.
Hello there.
Hi, Diana. Can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you. It's so sunny here. It's already dark and gloomy.
Yeah, there's cheering on the streets. I don't know if you can hear.
Yeah,
but, there's actually people cheering on the streets, and they've been cheering for the last hour. Since. Go ahead.
So you're living literally the moment as it happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, no, go on.
No, I mean, when we heard, actually, I started hearing the cheering. And I said, "What's this cheering?" And then I went on.
Can you actually show us? Is it going on at the moment, like as we're speaking right now?
Yeah, it's going on right now. It's a little less, but I mean, I'll just show you. I don't know if you can hear it or not. See if I can. I don't know if you can hear that. It's very subtle.
Yes, I can.
The cars.
I hope everyone can hear that as well.
Yeah, it's like I live just like in between two big streets, but yeah. So I don't know if you can like it's more quiet on my little street where I live on, but No.
I could hear it.
Yeah.
I was just gonna. Yeah, I was just gonna say that indeed today we feel like, at least I'm feeling like some sort of BBC commentator, like giving people some live analysis of what's happening at present.
It's going on right now. Yeah, it's like we're living history, right now.
I'm generally like overwhelmed with emotions and I'm almost crying. But no, I was just telling everyone that you are best placed to tell us what's going on, since you're in the US at present and you've practiced there for more than 15 years. So I guess, Dave, before delving into the impact on human rights of these US presidential elections, can you talk us through your experience as a lawyer, what it is to be a lawyer in the States at present, and how it's been in those years that you've been practicing, and what the future looks like?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, I went to law school motivated and inspired to try and make a positive difference. I was inspired by the rich history and tradition in the United States of social impact lawyering or public interest lawyering, activist lawyering, which I know is a theme for Human Rights Pulse this month. So I was very inspired by that tradition, and part of why I went to law school was to continue in that tradition. I think I was kind of in for a rude awakening. Once you get into legal practice, and it's very different than what you had anticipated, right? And then, of course, for many people, there's the
Oh,
financial
I
burden.
cannot hear you properly. Can you hear me correctly?
I can hear you. Can you not hear me?
Oops.
Diana, can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear you, but it's very, I don't know if it's my connection that is unstable. Now I cannot hear you any longer.
Okay. Can you hear
Okay,
me
now,
now?
yeah, now yes,
Okay.
now yes.
Yeah, great, perfect. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, it's just there's a lot of awakening you get in law
Yeah,
school about the industry. And so I would say, while I was in law school, the big event was the Iraq War, actually. And that was a big point
of
of
course.
awakening for me as
Yeah,
to the international rule of law being in threat, because all of the procedures in place that were designed to prevent the Iraq War, including UN Security Council authorization, legality, basic legality under international law. I mean, these are all things that are designed to prevent something like the Iraq War from happening, and none of those things worked, right? So it was a complete collapse, in my view, of the international rule of law. And that was also a big wake-up call, because I think it prompted the question of, well, why? Why did this thing not work as it was intended or supposed to work, in my view? And that challenged me to look more at human rights and international law issues. I spent, I did an internship doing refugee work in Central Europe with the UN. I've been lucky to be able to do a lot of work with refugees from Iraq and Jordan. And yeah, I mean, just a lot of really interesting experiences, I guess, on this issue of the international rule of law. I would say that's what's changed over the last 15 years. I think it's much harder to do social impact lawyering just for financial reasons than
yeah,
ever
of course.
before. And I also think that there's the United States today, I think, has more of the hallmarks of a struggling state, or a failing state, than it did 15 years ago, with respect to not just the international rule of law, but also the domestic rule of law. And so those are problems that have to be addressed. And, hopefully we're on the very first step of addressing them with the election. But
Oh yeah,
yeah,
I generally hope so. Yeah. Can I
yeah,
actually ask you a question, like straight away? Because you mentioned many times the international rule of law, and then now you just said as compared to the domestic rule of law. Now, I actually happen to write articles about this, but do you believe in an international rule of law proper? So, since we're gonna be talking about foreign policy and international law at large, so how do states cooperate or not with each other, and what happens when there are violations, and so on and so forth. So do you believe that there is actually an international rule of law that ought to be protected, and if so, how does that interact with the domestic rule of law, say in the
sure.
US, of course?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. There is international rule of law, and that's based on hundreds of years of conduct by international states that then becomes part and parcel of a practice of law that transcends national boundaries, that that lawyers and judges in whatever country can look to determine questions of international law. So that is, I think, for me, it's not a question that's that's something that exists, right?
That's a fact.
So
That's a fact
yeah,
of life.
yeah. So I think there are very good questions about who interprets this law. If you're familiar with Twale and like the Twale literature about, which criticizes the concept of international law as being a colonial instrument or a neo-colonial
Yeah.
instrument. I mean, there are criticisms, and those criticisms should be looked at. But I think, generally speaking, the broad consensus that I agree with is that there are general rules in place, including customary norms of international law, that states are obligated
Yeah,
to
and use
defend.
slogans, and yeah.
Exactly, to defend and protect. Yeah, absolutely.
And how do you think that is going to play out with Biden's foreign policy?
Well, I think the problem is that the United States, for many years, and throughout multiple administrations, regardless of political party, have taken the position that the United States gets to pick and choose which international laws it will abide by, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a big challenge, and I want to see Biden change that. I don't know if he will. I don't know if he has the consensus. It looks like the Senate, for example, is not going to go into Democratic hands. But even if it were in Democratic hands, with President Obama, there was a 2-year period when he had the legislature, right? The Democrats controlled the House and the Senate. They had the executive, and they did not do things that I think would comport the United States to its international legal obligations in many respects. So I think, my perspective is that to defend human rights both abroad and in the United States should join the International Criminal Court. I mean, that for me, that's like a basic premise. But,
Absolutely.
I don't think that that's up for grabs with Biden, as much as it should be, in my view. And, the Paris Accords and the climate change legal framework that is now, people are talking about. I mean, again, to defend human rights, there has to be a very powerful and robust U.S. response to the climate crisis from a legal perspective, and we'll see if that happens. So, so there's a lot of. I mean, Biden will have to confront these things. I don't think, and I think it's the job of lawyers who may, to push him on this stuff and to keep these issues. Again, the election, in my view, is not the end of the process of the rule of law, restoring the rule of law in the United States. It's the very beginning, right? So now we have an opening to push these issues, and the real hard work, I think, begins today.
See, actually, like what you said about the ICC was exactly the first thing that flagged up my mind as you started speaking. Now, I was reading some articles about this sort of, they called it US exceptionalism. So the fact that the US always either withdraws or does not take part at all in very important international instruments. And notably, the US is not subject to the ICC jurisdiction. Now, some supporters of this view used to say that it's actually correct to be on this exceptionalist front, because what's actually happening on the international law and international legal arena is actually a sham. So by withdrawing, the US is actually setting an example, because even the UN, for example, or the jurisdiction, the legitimacy of the ICC, it's a shambles, and it's not, they're actually covert protectors of human rights abusers. So the US says, no, we don't want to be part of that, because it's human rights abuse anyways. It's just disguised as international committee and all the good things, the ICC, the UN, and so on. What do you think about this position?
Yeah, I think it's wrong. I think that if that's true, assuming those criticisms are true, which, let's assume they're true. I don't think they're true, but assuming they're true, I think the response should be to participate, and as obviously the most powerful country in the world today. I mean, I don't think people would dispute that the United States is still, the most powerful country in the world today. It should be participating with these international mechanisms to use its power and influence to correct, what are maybe possibly, perceived problems or issues with these institutions, right? So it's not a question of walking away. What walking away does is sets the precedent for other countries to walk away.
Exactly.
And then by walking away, you're harming the international.
Oh, I cannot hear you once more.
Can you hear me now?
Let me see. Now I can hear you, but with this. Okay, yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you're harming the international system by walking away, or by refusing to participate. So I mean, there's no other system that we have access to, right? It's a question of setting a good example, I think, as the most powerful country, and laying out what should be neutral standards that apply equally to all participants in the international system. And in my view, the walking away is kind of a petulance, or it's a kind of even a misplaced belief that the United States, is stronger or safer by acting unilaterally. I don't think that's true at all. I think, the United States, what it's doing is carving out domains of power to act in ways that contravene established norms, right? And whether that makes it more powerful, and I don't know, whether it certainly makes it less of a participant in the international rule of law.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, AXA was just saying that Biden pledged to rejoin the Paris Agreement, so she suggested that participation to the ICC, or being subject to the ICC jurisdiction, might actually be on the plate. Although I'm also not quite sure, because what's happening at the moment, or at least my very limited view on the thing, is that yes, Biden is a very, very good glimpse of hope that we have right now, but I don't think he will depart so strongly from the orthodoxy of the presidential stances. Now, of course, he will set a very different line from the Trumpian administration, but what actually worries me at present is that Biden himself, he's been in the establishment for longer than I can remember. And he's been in foreign policy for a very, very, very long time. And he has quite a moderate approach. So yeah, this ICC problem that we've got here, I'm not quite sure. I don't really see him as bold in stating that, yes, we're going to participate in the ICC. Now, AXA is saying, she's suggesting, but is the USA still the most powerful country in the world today? She says, with so many countries simply disregarding its authority, it doesn't seem to be a hegemon anymore. Now, yeah, that's also a point. So I was thinking about that as well. We keep on saying, and we keep on clinging of ideals of the US as this big leader and hegemon in various areas, be it economic, legal, and social, cultural, whatever we want to call it. But is it really so? Now, of course, China is a threat and I'm saying threat, quoting the words of diverse politicians that refer to it. What do you think about this tension between China and the USA? Actually, there is a very specific problem here, which is Southeast Asia. What do you think is going to happen in terms of these three countries being all three against each other, and with the human rights abuses that are happening in Southeast Asia at the moment?
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, you want to talk about that first? Well, I mean, I think I mean, you're referring to Myanmar and or what do you? Yeah, what
basically,
three
what I'm saying is that there is this, of course, tension between China and the US, and this anti-communist sentiment, and the long-standing tradition of the US supporting whoever is anti-communist, even though those very countries that are anti-communist are genocidal or committing human rights abuses themselves.
Yeah.
And in this case, what happens with Southeast Asia is that the US wants to win their sympathy as to strengthen the position against China, but then by doing so, they're actually supporting human rights abuses that are happening in Laos, in Philippines, Indonesia, and so on and so forth. So how can we assess that, redress that, if we can?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think there's a couple components to your question. One is the U.S.-China relations. Two is the U.S. longstanding support of anti-communist regimes, right? And that's what's known the Kirkpatrick doctrine after Gene Kirkpatrick, and the idea being that this is from the 80s, that the U.S. should support any regime that is, no matter how terrible. It's better to support basically a right-wing authoritarian regime than a socialist communist regime. That's the doctrine, right? And so this led to U.S. support not just of regimes in Indonesia and the Philippines, but in Latin America. This has been going on for a long time. I mean, this is what led the United States to support, Saddam Hussein for many years before they turned on him. Yeah, I mean, that's a terrible doctrine, right? I don't agree with that doctrine. I think the United States should position itself and champion itself as the neutral proponent of the international rule of law. I don't think it needs to be any more difficult than that. And as part of that, what the United States should do, in my view, is sign on to human rights treaties, which, like the International Covenant on, the cultural, economic, social rights, join the ICC. It should participate in good faith with these international treaties and mechanisms, and commit its resources to upholding the international rule of law. And I think, to get into your second question about U.S.-China relations, I think that's the best way and the most effective way to think about a multipolar world, a world where there are many different power sources, and to say, irrespective of our differences or national competition for alliances, it's in everyone's interests to be bound by certain limitations, and including human rights limitations or arms reductions limitations or whatever it is. But certainly human rights limitations should be enforced, neutrally. Now, the big problem for the United States, the 300, 400, 500-year-old human rights abuse in the United States with respect to discrimination and, apartheid, if we can call it that, I think is one of the major reasons why the United States struggles in talking about human rights globally, because we have a long history of human rights abuses here against minorities, against the indigenous people here. And so to actually start joining these treaties, would require us to possibly reflect on government abuses that have taken place, that have gone unaddressed. Yeah, and that have not been acknowledged or redressed or atoned for. And so as a result, I think there's a cultural hesitation to doing that, because then we would have to admit that there's been some wrongdoing, and that's a tough thing for anyone to do in their personal lives, but it's an exceptionally tough thing for people to do
it as a government,
as a country, as a country or a government. Exactly. Yeah.
Do you think, I really like the word that you said, cultural hesitation. Do you think that with Kamala Harris being vice president, which is, as I said at the very beginning, is something so historic, not only first female, but first Black indigenous woman to ever be elected as vice president, do you think that that actually could push for this cultural shift that we want to see? I was literally just reading tweets and things from young people on the internet, and there is really this, and from Kamala Harris herself, there is really this feeling of belonging and of wanting to overturn the old establishment. I know this sounds very, very cliched. It's like the classic out with the old, in with the new. But do you think that that could actually happen with her as vice president?
If it does, it would have to happen from the ground up. I don't think the mere fact that she's vice president will change anything, because we've already seen the mere fact that President Obama was the first, non-white or Black president didn't really change anything. And in fact, people forget that the Ferguson protests, started under Obama, right? So President Obama, Black Attorney General as head of the federal government. I mean, we had large-scale resentment from African-American Black communities, people of color communities. Obama was still taking a very, the government policies of the Obama administration did not begin to address, much less address, but they did not address, nor did they begin to address, in my view, these challenges of race relations, or really, I should say, human rights abuses in the United States, right? And that's what we should call them. I mean, they are human rights abuses. They're crimes against humanity when done by official government actors, and arguably apartheid. I mean, I think that has to be addressed in a way that is, it has to be addressed like that, and it has to be rectified and acknowledged and ultimately atoned for. And I don't know what atonement means when we're talking about a 500-year crime, but I think, the first place to start might be with the victims themselves, and to say, well, what do victims want? And, that's what we do everywhere else in the world, but we don't do it here, right? So maybe ask the victims and see what they want. And then you start there and you have a conversation, a dialogue, and then, you do that. But, and I don't mean to single out, I mean, we're talking about the United States today. I don't mean to single out, every country commits crimes, right? So the United States is not immune from that, but I think that the difference is that the rhetoric of the United States is very inspirational, and I think it's if we're gonna live in a country that aspires to this type of greatness, I think if you're setting the bar high for yourself, then you should try and you should try and meet it
to live up to it.
And unfortunately, I think unless we actually address the problem of race relations, we cannot take any legitimate, I think, stand to being a human rights leader.
You just threw out there a series of things that just prompted so many questions that I've got
Sure.
for you. So the very first one is something that is a bit of a repetition, but I think it's important. So see, I was very optimistic there by thinking, yeah, we've got now Kamala Harris as vice president. Everything is going to change. We're going to change the world, and we're going to live in a happy world forever. But as Barack Obama showed, and many other things, like this is not always the case. And this brought me back to, again, what I've read just earlier about the strategic goals of the US. Now, we talked about that in the foreign policy, but what do you think, well, first of all, how do you think that the US assesses those strategic goals in terms of, well, with a view to human rights? How are the resources allocated when deciding where to intervene, where not to intervene, where to put the money, who to, I don't know, whose army to support or whatever? And now, currently, what do you think is going to be on the priority top agenda in light of the Biden presidency and in light of those strategic goals?
Yeah, that's
So
a great
what do you
question.
think?
Yeah, so what Biden has publicly said that he will not side with regimes, or that the foreign policy will change to reflect a government's commitment to human rights. I mean, if that's true, that's a very laudable shift. But that would really reflect a big shift in human rights. And actually, I'm not sure. I mean, when we talk about human rights abuses, I mean, the problem, one of the big problems is that human rights, and largely, a big factor of this has been the United States, dismissing its own human rights obligations or deciding it doesn't need to live up to international human rights commitments. But globally, I think human rights have absolutely been on the decline since 9/11. I mean, the Torture Convention is a great example. So, Ronald Reagan, sent the Torture Convention to the Senate, and this conservative Senate, or, the Senate in the 80s, ratified the Convention Against Torture. I don't think in today or under Obama or any time after 9/11, we would have had the guts in this country to ban torture, right? So that tells you how much has differed. And, largely because of the United States walking away from these very important obligations, other countries have also walked away from theirs. There's a lot of literature on the United Kingdom, basically feeling it's okay to be complicit, not just with the U.S. crimes that have been committed, but also in its own foreign policy. Norway, I mean, even a country like Norway we can talk about, or, a lot of countries that have a mantle of saying that they're, supporters of human rights. I mean, in the context, for example, of climate change, Norway has exported so much pollution to other countries. Norway has a giant sovereign wealth, account based on the sales of fossil fuels, right? And we know that climate change, catastrophic climate change is going to lead to generations, thousands of years of potential human rights abuses. So, I mean, everywhere you look, if you dig even a little bit, the human rights situation is grim. And so I think if Biden wants to make a difference, it has to be by leading by example. And the very first thing he could do would be to commit the United States to ratification of some of these treaties. Even if the Senate says no, make it a discussion point and say, let's do it. He could start talking about race relations in a way that it brings in a human rights element. And to say that when police kill Black people, in a way that's discriminatory, that's not just a crime, it's an international crime, right? It's a crime against humanity. And, he could start incorporating some of that language, that legal language, to shift the dialogue about how, for us to be better global citizens, we have to start, rectifying these problems at home, and to be honest about them. I mean, I think, and to say that irrespective of what your position is, let's get the factual dispute out of the way. Like, this stuff is happening. So whether you are a fan of it or not a fan of it, let's start with the fact that it's happening, talk about why it's illegal, and then figure out ways to solve it. I mean, if he was really committed, I think you would see that type of rhetoric. I'm not sure. I mean, time will tell. I remember the excitement in 2008, again, after the illegal war in Iraq, which I think was a huge moment for not just me, but for a lot of people, who saw the collapse of the international rule of law. And we were expecting a lot more from Obama. And Obama, unfortunately, refused to hold anyone to account for the Iraq war. He refused to He refused to give unequivocal answers about the United States' own human rights obligations. He accelerated the use of drone warfare in a way that is highly problematic under international law. And he refused to do much about the climate crisis, which now has led to another 8 years of delay and dithering. So if that's what we're going to see from Biden, again, then I would say the work is just beginning, and there's a small window here to really put pressure to change politics again, even more fundamentally, 2 years from now, 4 years from now, and to keep the progress going. Because it's not just going to be one man or one woman like Kamala Harris who's going to fix everything for us.
Yeah, this is huge. I absolutely agree. And I think there is a fundamental problem in here. And this is something that we've spoken in previous post session. Now, whenever we're talking about when we're talking about human rights abuses, not only there are the strategic goals that push whatever president is in charge to be always vague and not actually take a position and not make any statements and so on and so forth, but there's also a lack of dialogue with the very victims of abuses, because there are, even when there are steps being taken and it might look like human rights are being upheld and whatnot, actually no, this is still part of the strategic goals of the country itself, because that very vital dialogue with the victims and starting from the bottom and going out there on the streets and asking the people who are affected, what do you actually want? How can we help you? How can we as a country, as a people, as an administration help you personally and as a community of vulnerable people, how can we help you improve your life? That is lacking, and I think it's still lacking. And I don't know if the influence of these two people, who, yes, are only two people, but are they hold a very powerful image. I really hope that will instill in the community and also in the lower echelons of the administration a stronger feeling of actually wanting to make that dialogue happen, make it a reality. So yeah, we really need to start from there. But yeah, and then I had a more personal question for you, because you said atonement before. So I know that you've been involved with a project that you founded yourself, I think, or co-founded, but that's just Atonement. So a not-for-profit charity, similarly to Human Rights Pulse. So yeah, if you could tell us what's your work in this charity and which sort of human rights you focus on, or your work there.
Sure, yeah. So the idea of Just Atonement is actually to provide opportunities for law students and also lawyers who want to engage in this type of transformational work to maintain global civilization, for generations, not just for us, but for generations to come. And so it's a generational project, and the idea is to create a framework for lawyers today and law students to look at rule of law issues, particularly with respect to climate change, and to learn about these things. And then, we're in the process of creating an infrastructure with Just Atonement to potentially fund, very interesting projects. Just Atonement is a partner with Human Rights Pulse and is supporting the work of Human Rights Pulse. We have other projects lined up that we are, looking forward to supporting, and eventually also helping lawyers or advocates, as we're calling them, advocates in residence, find projects, but also potentially lawsuits that might inspire them, and to work with them to bring that type of transformational change that I think is really needed at this time. So that's the work of Just Atonement. The phrase comes from the Nuremberg trial. So at Nuremberg, the chief prosecutor at Nuremberg was an American named Robert Jackson, and he, in one of his opening statements to the court, or one of his statements, argued that there had to be a just atonement for German leaders who had engaged in these atrocities. And so the concept is to, do something similar to how does a country or a people or a society, how do they atone for the wrongs they've committed? And, in the personal space, this is a very tough question, right? So in any relationship, if you've committed a wrong, but we kind of know the process, right? You say you're sorry, you make amends, you try and patch things up, and sometimes you can retain and restore relationship, and sometimes you can't, right? But that's the human experience. At the level of groups, at countries, you know, we also engage in crimes and wrongdoings. And what's the process for stopping that, you know, and saying, and for changing it so that they don't happen again? We don't really have the technology for that. I mean, we don't really even have a way of talking about that. And, you know, the closest that, you know, the biggest example that's come up from the 20th century is the German experience with World War II. And that is an experience, right? And that there is some technology, you know, I'm using the word technology, not like in a scientific sense, but in a political science sense, I suppose. You know, there is that technology that exists from Germany that we can look to, but it's very rudimentary. You know, it's a lot like we've just discovered flight, you know, and so you have, you know, the Wright brothers and whoever else like throwing things in the air and they last for 10 seconds and then they come down. So we know this technology exists, but we're not at the jet engine stage yet. We're not at the rocketry stage yet, you know. So there's no one focused on this type of technology. So I think we need to focus on that and refine and build new types of political science technology that can, you know, help countries stop, you know, the commission of crimes in whatever sense they're doing, and make right for it. Because I think, as you and I both know, in a personal setting, when you make right for it, you don't do it again, right? There's a lesson that comes. That's the whole concept of atonement. Is you're not just that you've stopped doing it, but you understand why it was wrong.
Why it was wrong.
And you've committed to not doing it again, and you're not likely to do it again, because you understand that what you did was wrong. So, I mean, this type of concept, I think, needs to be explored at a group level, a national level. And, I mean, right now we have the commissions and the Human Rights Council, and they bring attention to crises. And that's very important, right? But as we both know as well, that's obviously not enough. That's not sufficient.
Of course.
Right? Yeah. So what needs to happen to make something like that? And I think that, you know, that is the building blocks of building a truly civilized world, you know, a world that is at peace, not conflict-free, because I think conflicts are part of humanity, and I don't think conflict is necessarily a bad thing. But what happens is that when conflict spills into violence, right, or crimes, I mean, that's what's wrong, right? So I think, you know, understanding how we can channel conflict into constructive ways and prevent abuses and trauma, you know, towards other people who we share the planet with.
That was so inspirational that I don't even have the time to take notes as you speak, because literally every single phrase that you speak is just fantastic. It could be quotes on quotes on quotes on quotes. Yeah, like I'm amazed. It's just atonement concept, like not only your project, but just this concept that stemmed from Nuremberg is so fascinating. But not only fascinating, it's so true and so yeah, just very true. And I think it's the foundation of the way forward. So the building blocks, as you called it. Now, two last question, I would guess. One is, do you think that you yourself as a lawyer, be it in your more sort of corporate law firm that you have, which is Comar Mollé LLP, and as in Just Atonement, Human Rights Pulse, and all your other pursuits, do you feel like contributing to this shift that we're talking about, that you're contributing not only to the dialogue, but through your legal work and your legal experience, and also your generally political experience, or even technological in the sense of legal tech, or, you know, like the proper thing, do you feel like you're being useful to the cause? And then the very last question is if you have any sort of very practical advice on, I don't know, a particular pursuit, a particular area where young people should intervene, or not only young people, just everyone in general, something that we should really focus on, or that we could do very practically to help.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think those questions are both related. I mean, for me, it's about understanding, like every day for me is an opportunity for me to learn more about myself and to learn about why I'm here. And I think that's actually very important work, personal work. and I'm very lucky and fortunate that I can do that professionally, right? And so, I'm lucky to have a private law firm, for example, in which I can really take on the matters that I like, work with my colleagues, have some measure of financial independence, and then pursue my nonprofit endeavors the same way. And that gives me the freedom to get to know myself. So what I would say is that all these pursuits that you mentioned are really a reflection of who I am, right? So you will know a lot about it just by looking at the work that I've done. That's me, that's who I am. And I would say that for young students or for young lawyers or for law students who are getting started, I would encourage you, or for anybody really, to think about, what it is you're here to do and what attracts you, what aspects of law attract you to that. And I think that goes also hand in hand with moments of awakening. So for me, a giant moment of awakening was the Iraq War, right? It was like a lightning bolt from the heavens, saying like, what happened here? How did this happen?
I can imagine.
Yeah. And that led me to ask deeper questions and to think about remedies and solutions and it really was a point where it's really influenced my life. And so, think about what are these moments, these really concrete moments that shook you and challenged you to think about why you were here. And I would say follow that feeling and follow that questioning and get to know yourself. And in that process, you will naturally discover projects that inspire you, things you want to work on, people you want to meet, activities you want to undertake. It'll just naturally happen, and then you'll have a series of works that will say everything about you as well.
That is just fantastic. I once again, I keep repeating myself, but I'm just totally fascinated by your words. And I think that those woke moments are crucial, but it's as crucial to get to know yourself. But that unfortunately is not so, it does flow naturally, but it takes time. So I think it takes a great deal of experience before. And my personal advice I'm very young, but I have a bit of experience under my belt, and my advice for the people would be to be open to whatever happens. So of course there are significant moments that will lead you in particular direction. So I don't know, if another war happens tomorrow, then people might be inclined to pursue international criminal law or international law rather than environmental law and so on. But to be open to all sort of, in this case, legal experience, and by actually working, that will make you understand who you really are and why you're here, what's your purpose in this world, and what's your role in the bigger system, and why you're fighting for, basically. So this is how I feel at the moment, and the more I work, the more I do, the more the clearer the vision is, and I'm sure that the more I proceed, the clearer the vision will be. So yeah, I guess that was my very bit. But
no, that's great.
Inder,
I would just just to follow up on that, or just to finish. I think that's exactly right. So if you haven't, you'll know when a moment is truly transformational for you.
Yeah.
And if you don't know if you've had it yet, then just don't worry about it.
That wasn't it.
Yeah, gain experience. I think that what you said is exactly right. Just keep getting experience, keep pursuing your interests. But be open, and they are truly life changing, and you'll know, And so,
yeah.
And when they
happen, feel it.
Yeah, and when they happen, you will absolutely know, and you'll feel a call to do something. And I think it's all very natural. And I guess the biggest lesson is don't drown it out. Don't drown that stuff out, or a lot of people drown it out because they want to be like other people. They want to have the same experiences that other people have. They want to live a quote unquote the right type of life, and then then you live your whole life not in harmony with who you are. So, and that to me is the saddest thing. That's actually so. Yeah, but in the meantime, if you're not sure about that, then I think what you said was 1,000% right. Just keep gathering experience and keep pursuing your interests and trying to trying to live life, so as
Yeah.
best as we can,
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Until like, hopefully we're not gonna be wiped out by an asteroid tomorrow or whatnot. But today, I have to say that today's news were
a little
particularly
encouraging.
great.
Yeah,
So,
it's good.
coronavirus, everything, but then okay, we have Trump is not there any longer. Good. We can
Exactly.
proceed from there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
Right. So I was just checking the time now briefly. I guess being a Saturday, we can
Yeah.
let
Call it
everyone
early.
go. And I thank you so much. Like
Yeah. Thank you, Diana.
this was just fantastic, and I'm sure people will, even if not many people were attending live. As always, those talks are gonna be posted afterwards, so you can replay them whenever you want. And I'm sure that Inder's words will be inspirational, not only for me, but for you as well. And you'll be delighted to hear them again. And yeah, I guess have a nice evening, everyone, and see you soon.
Yeah.
Thank you
Take care,
so much,
everyone.
Inder, once
Bye.
again.
Bye. Yeah. Take care. Bye.
Bye.